Hey love bugs, it's Mrs. Skutnik. I'm here to read you a chapter out of Charlotte's Web. I went up to the school and picked it up yesterday, I believe, so we can spend some time on our wonderful little break reading together. So I thought we could read the chapter that we ended on. It was called The Explosion, remember? And we made some predictions as to what exactly exploded. So we're going to read and find out. This is kind of a longer chapter, so bear with me as we read this together, okay? An explosion. Remember, as we read, really good readers will stop and think about what they're reading by asking questions, by talking about their reading. So if you ever need to pause the video to talk to your family about what we're reading about or to jot some things down, maybe make a comment in Google Hangout, in Google Classroom, or on Class Tag, just go ahead and do that and let me know what you're thinking about as we read the story, okay? So here we go. An explosion. Day after day, the spider waited head down for an idea to come to her. Hour by hour, she sat motionless, deep in thought. Having promised Wilbur she would save his life, she was determined to keep her promise. Charlotte was naturally patient. She knew from experience that if she waited long enough, a fly would come to her web. She felt sure that if she thought long enough about Wilbur's problem, an idea would come to her mind. Finally, one morning in the middle of July, the idea came. Why, how perfectly simple, she said to herself. The way to save Wilbur's life is to play a trick on Zuckerman. If I can fool Bug, thought Charlotte, I should surely fool a man. People are not as smart as bugs. Based off of that, what do you know about Charlotte? We know that she's patient and we know that she's a spider, but what do we know about her character? So, what are some character traits we could use to describe Charlotte? Go ahead and pause this video and talk to your family, or jot down some comments or some ideas to comment back to me what you think about Charlotte. Okay, we're going to continue. Hope you wrote some down. Wilbur walked into his yard at that moment. What are you thinking about, Charlotte? He asked. Oh, I was just thinking, said the spider, that people are very gullible. What does gullible mean? Gullible means easy to fool, said Charlotte. That's a mercy, replied Wilbur as he lay down in the shade of his fence and went right to sleep. The spider, however, stayed awake, gazing affectionately at him, making plans for his future. Summer was half gone, and she knew she didn't have much time. That morning, just as Wilbur fell asleep, Avery Arabelle wandered onto the Zuckerman's front yard. Followed by Fern, Avery carried a live frog in his hand. There's Charlotte, thinking on her web. Fern had a crown of daisies in her hair, and the children ran for the kitchen. Just in time for blueberry pie, said Mrs. Zuckerman. Look at my frog, said Avery, placing the frog on the drain board, holding out his hand for some pie. Take that thing out of here, said Mrs. Zuckerman. He's hot, said Fern. He's almost dead, that frog. He is not, said Avery. He's letting me scratch him between the eyes. The frog jumped and landed on Mrs. Zuckerman's dishpan of soapy water. You're getting your pie on you, said Fern. Can I go look for eggs in the henhouse, Aunt Ida? Run outdoors, both of you, and don't bother the hens. It's getting all over everything, shouted Fern. His pie is all over his front. Come on, frog, cried Avery. He scooped up his frog, and the frog kicked and splashed soapy water onto the blueberry pie. Another crisis, groaned Fern. Let's swing in the swing, said Avery, and the children ran to the barn. Mr. Zuckerman had the best swing in the county. It was a single long piece of heavy rope tied to the beam over the north doorway. At the bottom of the rope, there was a fat knot to sit on. It was arranged so you could swing without ever being pushed. You could climb the ladder to the hayloft, and then holding onto the rope and stood at the edge and looked down, you were scared and dizzy. Then you straddled the knot so that it acted as a seat. Then you got up all your nerve, took a deep breath, and then jumped. For a second, You seemed to be falling to the barn floor far below, but then suddenly the rope would begin to catch you, and you would sail through the barn door going a mile a minute with the wind whistling in your eyes and ears and hair. Then you would zoom upward into the sky and looked up at the clouds, and the rope would twist, and you would twist and turn with the rope. Then you would drop down, down, down out of the sky and come sailing back into the barn, into the hayloft. Then sail out again, not quite as far this time, and then in again, but not quite so high. Then out again, then in again, then out, then in, and then you jump off and fall down and let someone else try. Would you try that? Because Mrs. Skutnik, I certainly would never do that. I'm too afraid of falling and getting hurt. What do you think, though? Mothers for miles around worry that the Zuckermans swing, and they feared that some child would fall off. That's my fear, too. But no child ever did. Children almost always hang on to things tighter than their parents think they will. Avery put the frog in his pocket and climbed to the hayloft. The last time I swung in the swing, I almost crashed into the barn swallow, he yelled. Take that frog out, ordered Fern. Avery straddled the rope and jumped. He sailed out through the door, frog and all, into the sky. Frog and all. He sailed back into the barn. Your tongue is purple, screamed Fern. So is yours, cried Avery, sailing out with the frog. Why are their tongues purple? I wonder why. What do you think? I have hay in my dress and it itches, called Fern. Scratch it, yelled Avery as he sailed back. It's my turn, said Fern. Jump off. Fern's got the itch, sang Avery. When he jumped off, he threw the swing up into his sister. She shut her eyes tight and jumped, and she felt the dizzy drop and the supporting lift of the swing. When she opened her eyes, she was looking up into the blue sky, about to fly back through the doorway. They took turns for over an hour. When the children grew tired of the swing, they went down to the pasture and picked wild raspberries and ate them. Their tongues went from purple to red. Fern bit into the raspberry and it had a bad-tasting bug inside of it and got discouraged, and Avery found an empty candy box to put his frog in. The frog seemed tired after his morning in the swing, and the children slowly walked up to the barn. They too were tired and hardly had any energy to walk. Let's build a tree house, suggested Avery. I want to live in a tree with my frog. I'm going to go visit Wilbur, Fern announced, and they climbed the fence into the lane and walked lazily toward the pig pen. Wilbur heard them coming and got up. Avery noticed the spider web, and coming closer, he saw Charlotte. This picture of him swinging. What do you think Avery is going to do? He saw Charlotte, but why is that important? What do you think he might do? Hey, look at that big spider, he said. It's tremendous. Leave it alone, commanded Fern. You got a frog, isn't that enough? That's a fine spider, and I'm going to capture it, said Avery. He took off the corner of the candy box. Then he picked up a stick. I'm going to knock that old spider into this box, he said. Wilbur's heart almost stopped when he saw what was going on. This might be the end of Charlotte if the boy succeeded in catching her. You stop it, Avery, cried Fern. Avery put one leg over the fence of the pig pen. He was about to raise his stick and hit Charlotte when he lost his balance. He swayed and toppled and landed onto the edge of the Wilbur's trough, and the trough tipped up and then came down with a slap. The goose egg was underneath. There was a dull explosion, and the egg broke. And then, a horrible smell. Fern screamed. Avery jumped to his feet. The air was filled with terrible gas and smells from the rotten egg. Templeton, who had been resting in his home, scuttled away into the barn. Good night, screamed Avery. Good night. What a stink. I'm out of here. Fern was crying. She held her nose and ran toward the house. Avery ran after her, holding his nose. Charlotte felt greatly relieved to see him go. It had been a narrow escape. Later that morning, the animals came back from the pasture, the sheep, the lambs, the gander, the goose, and the 7 goslings. There were many complaints about the awful smell, and Wilbur had to tell the story over and over again about how the arable boy tried to capture Charlotte and how the smell of the broken egg drove him away just in time. It was that rotten goose egg that saved Charlotte's life, said Wilbur. The goose was proud of her share in the adventure. There's Avery falling onto the goose egg. The goose egg's down here. I'm delighted that egg never hatched, said the goose. Templeton, of course, was miserable over his loss of his beloved egg, but he couldn't resist boasting. It pays to save things, he said in his surly voice. A rat never knows when something is going to come in handy, and he'll never throw anything away. Well, said the lambs, this whole business is all well and good for Charlotte, but what about the rest of us? This smell is unbearable. Who wants to live in a barn that is perfumed with rotten egg? Don't worry, you'll get used to it, said Templeton. He sat up and pulled wisely at his long whiskers, then crept away to pay a visit to the dump. When Lurvy showed up at lunchtime carrying a pail of food for Wilbur, he stopped a few paces from the pig pen and he sniffed the air and made the face. What in thunder, he said. Settling down the pail, he picked up a stick that Avery had dropped and pried open the trough. Rats, he said. Phew, I might have known a rat may make a nest under this here trough. How I hate a rat. Lurvy dragged Wilbur's trough across the yard, kicked some dirt into the rat's nest, burying the broken egg and all Templeton's possessions. Then he picked up the pail. Wilbur stood in the trough, drooling with hunger. Lurvy poured, and slops ran creamily down and around the pig's eyes and ears. Wilbur grunted. He gulped and sucked and gulped, making squishing and swishing noises, anxiously trying to get everything at once. It was a delicious meal. Skimmed milk, wheat middlings, leftover pancake, a half a donut, a rind of a summer squash, 2 pieces of stale toast, a third of a ginger snap, a fish tail, 1 orange peel, several noodles from a noodle soup, the scum of a cup of cocoa, an ancient jelly roll, a strip of paper from the lining of the garbage can, and a spoonful of raspberry jello. Wilbur ate heartily, and he planned to leave half a noodle and a few drops of milk for Templeton. But then he remembered that the rat had been very useful in saving Charlotte's life, and that Charlotte was trying to save his life, so he left the whole noodle instead of half. Now that the broken egg was buried, the air cleared, and the barn began to smell good again. The afternoon passed and the evening came. Shadows lengthened, and the cool and kindly breath of the evening entered through the doors and the windows. Astride in her web, Charlotte sat moodily eating a horsefly, thinking about the future. After a while, she was bestirred herself. She descended to the center of her web, and then she began to cut some of the lines. She worked slowly but steadily while the other creatures drowsed. None of the others, not even the goose, noticed that she was at work. Deep in his soft bed, Wilbur snoozed over in their favorite corner with the goslings whistling a night song. Charlotte tore quite a section out of her web, leaving some open space in the middle. Then she started weaving something to take the place of the threads that she had removed. When Templeton got back from the dump around midnight, the spider was still at work. The next chapter is called The Miracle. I would like for you to make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen? Why do you think they called this chapter coming up The Miracle? I look forward to seeing you guys soon, especially on Tuesday during our Google Hangout. So make sure you can be there at 1 o'clock. I'll see you guys then. Bye.